Thank you for joining today. I am honored to have been invited by our partner Peel and the other agencies to discuss some of the topics involving educating students with disabilities during the 2020 pandemic. We certainly never expected such an overwhelming response, and I know that the intent of the presentation is to reach families that may not have had easy accessibility to the information. So we are thrilled to have such an audience. However, due to the overwhelming response, the presentation, at least this part, is being pre-recorded to allow for accuracy in captioning, translation, and interpreting. The recorded session will be available on the Peel website following the showing. I do intend to record this in one take, so you will get the true live experience. The Bureau cannot thank all of our agency partners for the collaboration around supporting students with disabilities during this very difficult time. Prior to beginning, I want to preface the conversation with the premise that this information presented today is as we understand it now in this moment. Things, as we know, have changed frequently and quickly at the mercy of this virus. We are all in unprecedented times. IDEA was not designed to be implemented during a pandemic, and there are no historical practices to pull upon when making decisions. The United States Department of Education has been clear and consistent with the message of the responsibility of delivering free and appropriate public education, FAPE, to students with disabilities during this time. Every state in the nation is grappling with the how of this process, and each state has developed guidance for their field. Each state is unique and has their own laws and variables to consider when creating their guidance. So the conversation today is based upon Pennsylvania's guidance to Pennsylvania schools this year. It is not legal advice. I will intentionally try to use parent-friendly language and parent-friendly concepts to support the intended audience and not fill the presentation with a lot of the regulatory language. The goal is to support the whole audience in a better understanding of this process. Recognizing that each school entity and community is unique, there are common factors plaguing the school communities, but the solution needs to mirror the uniqueness of each community. The Bureau of Special Education has identified some foundational practices that schools and families should follow during this time. Each school should draw upon the guidance and implement as appropriate. Since arrival of COVID-19 earlier this year, PDE's focus has been on supporting the schools and preserving the health and safety of the school communities, as well as balancing the interest of servicing the individual needs of students. The 2020-21 school year is going to look different in every community. Pennsylvania is a diverse state, and there's no one-size-fits-all approach that will be effective to reopen schools in every community. Local schools and communities are best positioned and equipped to make these very difficult decisions about the new school year based on the local conditions and resources. Peel has done a fabulous job of collecting the questions from the families and educators prior to this showing. They will be taking live questions throughout. And I promise you, I have read every single question multiple times in preparation for today. And I will review the additional questions. It is difficult to read all of the concerns and know that I will be able to respond to many of them. But there are some concerns that we may not be able to respond to today because we are still developing the best response based on this situation. The pandemic has placed us all in an unpredictable time. It's uncertain and it is a path untraveled. We are all in a situation to develop responses to this new situation. There were many questions that shared the same concept, and we have arranged the questions in areas of topics. I will have slides with some of the actual questions from families. And if you see a question that looks a little familiar, it just might be the one you provided. I will do my best to respond based on current Pennsylvania guidance, so you are aware of the content. I will not read all of the questions, but summarize the topic and then provide information. The answers are based either on Individuals with Disabilities Act, the Pennsylvania Special Education Law and Regulation, or written guidance from various federal and state agencies that have been providing support during this time, including the United States Department of Education, CDC, Pennsylvania Department of Education, or the Department of Health. Before I begin, I would like to show you some of the resources available to educators and families developed specifically to support during the COVID-19 pandemic. I will refer to these resources during the presentation, so I would like to show them to you briefly. We have developed an array of resources and supports for educators and families from our Patent Technical Training and Assistance Network. The Patent System is the arm of the Bureau to provide professional development and resources to educators and families. To show you a little bit within the resource, I need to stop sharing my screen. Okay, so this is the patent website. It is located at www.patten.net, www.pattan.net. If you go onto the website, on the front page, you will see this orange box for resources for families, students, and educators. If you click on the box, you will see there are an array of resources and supports. As we create new resources, we locate them at the top of the front page. So our most recent development is the Patent Family Resources for Students with Complex Learning Needs. If you click on the link, it will take you down to an array of resources and supports for supporting students with complex needs. There are resources and connections to many support agencies, HUNAE, Peel, the ARC, Include Me from the Start. All of these entities have worked very hard to provide resources and supports during this time. If you scroll to the bottom, there's a list of all the initiatives that Patent supports. If you click on a particular initiative, such as autism, they have supports for families or educators. I'm going to click on the family button. And if you go through, you can see that there are an array of supports for families. They are either videos, resources, and if you go up to the top, there are office hours. So you can sign up for live support from patent consultants to help you in any area that you need related to that particular area. This has been our most used support during the COVID-19 pandemic. We have consultants where you can sign up for office hours. They will contact you and they can provide live synchronous support virtually based on their schedule. So parents are able to reach out to them and educators are able to reach out to them. And this support is available in the Autism Initiative as well as the Behavioral Initiative. So I welcome you to go through the Patten website to look for any supports that you may need during this time. Another location I would like to show you is where the guidance from the state is located. For general Pennsylvania Department of Education guidance, you can go to the Pennsylvania Department of Education front webpage. On the webpage, you will see an array of links, and if you click on the reopening guidance for the 2020-21 school year, there you can find the links to provide information that is provided to schools to open school. And if you click on the Special Education, the Bureau of Special Education webpage, over in this gray box are the list of specific guidance the Bureau has put out related to COVID-19. If you click on the links, it will take you to the written guidance. Okay, so those are a lot of resources available for educators and families to use. These are the links that would connect you to those resources. There are additional parent resources, parent companions, that are available on the Patten website under the Family Engagement, which is a written summary of some of the information to support families. They are available in English and they are also available in Spanish. I encourage you to go on to the Patten website under Family Engagement to locate these resources. We will start to get into the content and some of the questions now. So if you review this screen, you see there are a lot of questions related to free and appropriate public education. There have been many questions posted regarding what services are required for schools to deliver during this time. Many of you have expressed concerns regarding your school's inability in regard to providing all of the services as they are outlined in the IEP. Local education agencies or schools must provide free and appropriate public education consistent with the need to protect the health and safety of students with disabilities and individuals providing the education, specially designed instruction, and related services to the students. Due to COVID-19 pandemic, schools may not be able to provide all of the services in the same manner that they typically were provided. It's now more about how are the services going to be provided. Schools should work with their IEP teams, which include families, to ensure that a student receiving special education services and related services are continuing to receive and be provided with FAPE that is reasonable and appropriate for each student's circumstance. Doesn't mean that everything that was delivered in a brick and mortar setting has to be delivered exactly the same way. Not necessarily. Special education and related services and supports may need to be adjusted through the IEP process, but they still have to equate to FAPE. IEP teams should work to ensure that students are receiving appropriate services during the COVID-19 pandemic while ensuring the service delivery is aligned with the health and safety guidelines, including social distancing. Schools should continue to follow local policies regarding changing or amending an existing IEP. During this time, your school may be able to implement all of the portions of your child's IEP as it is currently written, regardless of your school's instructional delivery model. Example, if they're in person, if they're virtual, if they're in a hybrid. For example, if your child has specially designed instruction tools and or equipment in his or IEP, like a slant board or writing grips, your school should be able to continue to provide these to your child in accordance with his or her IEP, whether the instruction is occurring in a school building or in a remote learning setting. Your school should also distribute the specially designed instruction tools and equipment to you in accordance with the health and safety guidelines. If your child's IEP requires adjustments and or revisions to account for your school's instructional delivery model, your child's IEP team should make any necessary adjustments and or revisions to your child's IEP through the collaborative IEP process to ensure the delivery of FAPE for your child. For example, your child's IEP may need to adjust the specially designed instruction or the related services, particularly how and when it is being delivered, to account for instruction being delivered in a school building, in a remote learning environment, or some type of hybrid approach. There are many questions posed regarding evaluations and reevaluations that were in process prior to the COVID-19 mandatory school closures. Schools and parents should work together to meet IDEA requirements, including evaluation and reevaluation timelines, as best as possible. According to the USDE March 21st guidance, schools are encouraged to work with parents and guardians to reach a mutually agreed upon extension time as appropriate. Schools may obtain informed consent from parents and guardians to extend the 60-day timeline. Schools and parents should make every effort to complete the evaluations and reevaluations within as little delay as possible. However, there could be situations in which schools need to gather information or perform assessments that must occur in person. It is at this time that the team can develop a mutually agreed upon extension. Evaluation and reevaluation timelines have not been waived. BSC is required to determine a school as being non-compliant for failure to meet the timelines. And in accordance with IDEA requirements, if schools go out of compliance due to the COVID-19 experience, they are expected to correct all non-compliance as soon as possible. There were quite a few questions regarding if schools were allowed to provide the assessments virtually or via Zoom. If standardized tests, such as cognitive assessments or formal achievement tests, are not designed to be administered virtually, the administration of such tests must be given through the means in which they were developed and standardized to be considered valid and reliable. Deviations from standardization must be reported and at times can invalidate results which could potentially impact eligibility determinations. If there are standardized tests, such as cognitive assessments or formal achievement tests designed to be administered virtually, schools should consider the impact of environmental or other factors which could compromise the validity of the results. Therefore, evaluations that require in-person testing or observations should be postponed until the school deems it safe for staff and students for in-person testing. If there is enough information to determine eligibility without the standardized assessments, the multidisciplinary team can do so. If a child who has yet to be determined eligible is struggling during the extension, schools may provide additional supports to the student through their MTSS model. On the patent website, there is a parent companion document representing this information. One other series of questions that we are receiving is related to the transition of students from early intervention to school-age services. Do they need to be evaluated? Will services be into place? Very critical concerns of parents during this very critical transition from preschool into kindergarten. Preschool early intervention students that have been identified with a school-age disability category while in early intervention do not necessarily need to be reevaluated to begin to receive services as they transition into kindergarten. These could include students with disability categories such as intellectual disability, speech and language impairments, or autism, just to name the most prevalent. Past practice has been to reevaluate students transitioning from early intervention that have a developmental disability, a developmental delay. They have needed to be reevaluated to determine if they were eligible for a school-age disability category prior to transitioning to a school-age program. However, based on the difficulty of completing some assessments this year, the Bureau of Special Education has adjusted the policy to allow schools to adopt the developmentally delayed disability category from early intervention into school age in an effort to support a smooth transition. This means that schools may adopt or revise the current preschool IEP and issue a NOREP with collaboration of the families to provide services in kindergarten. The intent is to ensure students transitioning from early intervention are not delayed from receiving services until the schools are able to conduct a thorough evaluation. Again, this decision should be made on an individual child-by-child basis, case by case, with home and school in collaboration. The Bureau of Special Education is expecting the students with the developmentally delayed diagnosis to be reevaluated by December 1st, 2020. If there is a student that is transitioning directly from preschool early intervention into first grade, schools must reevaluate those students prior to the student entering first grade. The mandatory school closing and the need to socially distance has really impacted the convenience of holding all of the meetings that occur with special education. There have been quite a few questions posed regarding, can there be remote or virtual meetings? Virtual meetings, phone call meetings, they are permissible in this situation, and they have actually always been permissible. We just are in a situation they are being used much more often. It is important that if meetings are held either by the phone or virtually, that the method in which the people are participating is documented on the attendance sheet. As we had to do the pivot to remote services, remote instruction for students, all students pivoted very quickly from the schools into their homes to begin to receive their education. There has been some very specific questions that parents have asked. And again, FAPE is still the responsibility of the school to provide. It is the methodology that might need to be adjusted. How can it be delivered in a way that ensures the health and safety of all? This is not an easy task for anyone involved. We can't emphasize enough that there should be open, regular communication between the schools and families. IEP teams should be working collaboratively to determine how instruction, services, and accommodations will be made in the remote schooling environments. approaching the collaboration between school and families with the lens of what can be done during this time to deliver FAPE, what can be done to meet the needs of the students with disabilities while maintaining the health and safety of all. For our students with more complex needs, there are many different accessibility features built into technology today. There have been a concern that the more complex the student needs are, the more challenging it is to meet their needs. But as we pivot into this virtual world, more and more creativity is occurring and more options are becoming available. There are means to provide services virtually, and I've heard of quite a few creative developments occurring, such as orientation and mobility training by using Google Maps. We may not be able to deliver services in the ideal manner, but we are not in ideal situations, and schools are faced to find alternative ways to meet the needs of students to help them make progress on their goals. So until we are back into more traditional service delivery models, we need to continue to be creative in how we are meeting those needs and supporting students on the progress toward their goals, understanding that this is a path toward developing the goal, and there are steps that can be taken along the way to improve the skill set. Instruction for students should be under the direction of a certified school employee. It can be provided synchronously or asynchronously, whether we are in the physical school buildings or whether we are in a remote situation. There is a question on here that says, as a special education teacher, what do I need to tell my general education teachers? I really appreciate this question. I really appreciate the teacher putting this question out there. What do I need to tell my general education teachers? Because there are times during this path right now, with everything being uncertain, that I really like to hold on to past practices when we can. And this is something that is just familiar to us. This is a great example of how we can hold on to the past practices and principles. Regular education teachers and special education teachers need to have ongoing collaboration and conversations around the same themes they did before the pandemic. What are the needs of the students? How can they be met? What support services or accommodations need to be made within the general education class, whether it's virtual, remote, whether it's in the physical school buildings with social distancing? How might the work need to be adjusted in this new context? How can things be accommodated based on this new circumstance? How can we ensure students with disabilities have the opportunity for meaningful, authentic involvement in general education classes? The most critical point of this question is we need to ensure the collaboration between general education and special education is intentional, regular, and more than ever. There were a couple questions regarding underlying concerns of families. These two questions highlight some fears of families that his or her child, their children, might be forgotten, or that a parent feels like their voice is not currently being heard regarding the concerns of their child. The time we are in is astronomically complex. Schools are dedicating extensive time to reopening, and as we are seeing, many are having to shift again from their extensive plans of reopening their physical school buildings to pivoting back to supporting more remote at the start of the school year. This is all due to the plight of this virus. The physical logistics of opening or the quick pivot back to remote, it's very intense and it's very complex. At the same time, Parents and families are anxiously awaiting a consistent plan and the details around their individual student, as they should. This is a place when the system is in a state that it could be at odds with each other. There's just so much and too much going on for everyone. Our advice in this situation is to, as a parent, is to reach out to your district. Start with the teacher. Then if you aren't satisfied with the teacher or they don't have the responses that you need, then go to the principal, go to the special education director to voice your concerns. They're there and they're working very hard to meet the needs of the community right now. If parents still do not feel heard based on the nature of this situation, at the end of this slide, at the end of this slideshow, there will be information for parents of different support entities that can guide the process and facilitate collaboration between home and school, both from the agency side and from the Bureau of Special Education. If you are having concerns regarding the skill area of your students, you're working with them at home and you're noticing different areas of concern, document your concerns, gather some examples to refer to. So when you're having the conversations with your schools, you're able to provide the examples of them. There have been a few questions regarding parents' choice during this time. It's very confusing, and parents are really deliberating what the right option is for them right now. So there were some questions regarding if I choose to homeschool my child during this pandemic, what could the ramifications be? There is no change in the process to start a homeschool education program due to the COVID pandemic. I would just recommend you contact your local school to determine what the process is in your area. For schools with disability, for students with disabilities, the home education program does need to be approved by a certified special education teacher or licensed clinical or certified school psychologist. For students that are homeschooled, school districts must allow students who are homeschooled or in homeschool programs within their school district to participate in activities such as clubs, music ensembles, athletes, theatrics, those type of activities. However, there is no requirement for a school to provide related services to those students. There have been questions around if parents were choosing to enroll their student in cyber charter schools. Cyber charter schools are required to provide special education services and related services to all enrolled students eligible under IDEA, just as the resident school district is. Both schools need to maintain health and safety of staff and students when providing these services. Parents may decide if their child will remain in their resident school district, or they may enroll their child into a cyber charter school. Students and families should have the right to a timely enrollment and the provision of services in either entity, the cyber charter school or their resident school district. There have been questions related to transitions, students that are in high school and some of the unique services that they are looking forward to receiving in order to prepare them for the next phase of life of transitioning from school to adult life. Some of the questions revolve around the career and technical schools. So if your child is enrolled in a career and technical center, it is the expectation that the students will receive career and technical education. Some schools will send students to the career and technical center, even if the school district is all virtual. Other districts that are all virtual are going to provide the career and technical education virtually. This is the students should receive their career and technical education. Um, it just may be either in person or virtual, and that is a local decision. So we would recommend, if you are in this situation, that you reach out to your school and your career and technical center to determine what it would look like for your particular child this year. There have been questions related to community-based experiences, students that need to access the community to meet their transition goals. It has been challenging to provide the community-based experiences during the stay-at-home orders, and in a way to maintain the social distancing expectation. Moving forward, there are some areas this may be able to occur more readily, and other areas, until the virus surpasses, may continue to be a challenge. In an effort to meet the need and provide opportunities for progress toward these goals, there are virtual transition experiences available to students. They aren't the same, but they are a way to continue to develop the skills of students with disabilities during this time, if that is necessary. They can be found on the Patent website or on the National Training and Technical Assistance for Transition website. And there will be competitive employment transition grants being awarded this year from the Bureau of Special Education for schools to enhance their transition opportunities for students with disabilities. And one condition of receiving the grant is that they must be working to enhance the remote ability to provide transitional experiences. So in these areas that the virus is putting up some barriers, we are working hard to develop workarounds to support the goals of our students. There have been situations, just due to the complexity of the situation and the demands placed on families right now, that parents have asked, can I just not receive services? Can I just not do this right now? It has always been within the right of the parents to refuse special education related services. We highly encourage you not to do that. We highly encourage you to work collaboratively with your schools to develop a plan that can be implemented and meet FAPE for your child. If students are of compulsory school age, the students must attend. Schools need to offer appropriate special education related services, and those offerings should be documented, whether parents choose to access the services or not. COVID compensatory services. There has been quite a few questions related to my child has not been able to access services in the same way, or during the mandatory school closures, I'm concerned that my child may have regressed in skills. What do I do about that? So COVID-19 compensatory services is the intention that when the time is right, that schools will be working collaboratively with families to systemically develop a way to mitigate the potential loss of skills or lack of progress that the COVID-19 pandemic has caused. There is a visual that I will refer to for ease of understanding. Now, again, the COVID-19 compensatory services guidance was put out when we were anticipating open all schools operating in the school buildings this year. And then the virus certainly had other ideas and are pivoting us to a different scenario. But the intent of the COVID-19 compensatory services is when the time is right, that schools should be gathering baseline data to determine where the students' skills are right now. And they would compare the baseline data to the skills level of where the students were when the schools closed last March. They would be measuring to see what the skills were in March as compared to what they are at the time that they run their baseline data. It's at that point that they would know where to begin instruction to try to support the students to continue to make progress moving forward, as well as recoup the skills that they may have lost over the break. All students regress, whether they receive services or not over summertime. So we're anticipating that all students with or without disabilities may have shown some regression over the school closures and over the summertime. So systemically, schools will be working to develop the skill sets of all students, students with disabilities and without disabilities through the regular education process. And we were recommending that this process coincide with that process. So special educators will be gathering baseline data, continuing with the instruction as outlined in the IEP, while trying to ensure that students are recouping the skills that may have been lost or making more progress during this recoupment period. After the end of the recoupment period, which the Bureau is recommending no more than 3 months, and that timeline really is going to depend on the circumstance of the particular school district of when they're able to start this process. But by the end of no later than the 3rd month, they should be doing a remeasurement of where students are based on the instruction that they receive between the baseline and the end of this time period. If students recouped all their skills and came up to par where would be expected prior to the mandatory school closing, then they wouldn't need the compensatory COVID compensatory services. And that would be a great thing, because then they have been able to mitigate the potential negative impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, if after the period of time where they are receiving instruction and during this recoupment phase, if students were not able to demonstrate adequate progress as related to their goals in March, or have recouped the skills that they measured lost from the baseline, it's at that point that the student would be in need of COVID-19 compensatory services. The IEP team should come together and they should develop a plan to look at what services are necessary to work on those skill areas, how much services, and how those services are going to be delivered. The intent is to have a systemic approach to work with our students with disabilities to ensure that we mitigate the potential negative impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, so that we have a process in place to support families and a system where schools are able to provide systemic delivery of this service to support students to make up for the potential loss of skills. These COVID compensatory services would be provided possibly through extended days, or possibly on potential breaks, or potentially next summer, 2021. There are a lot of logistics involved in this, a lot of dynamics of everything that has to be organized to have this occur. But this is a process that we will be supporting school districts to go through in the upcoming school year as things settle into the school year. Again, we are recommending no later than, longer than 3 months for this process from start to finish, but that doesn't mean that it needs to, every student has to wait till the end of 3 months. Everything is individualized. There are students that we might know right away that had the greatest difficulty accessing services for a variety of reasons during this time. So these conversations can start sooner based on the particular circumstances of the students or the community, or whatever the situations may be. We did open up the latitude of 3 months, particularly because the gap between the closure of school of March 19th and the end of the summer is a much longer period of time than summertime. So it naturally would take a little bit longer to recoup skills when the break is a little bit longer. So we wanted to be true to the process. We also know that there are a lot of dynamics happening and schools are trying to reopen, parents are getting back to work, and the possibility of having over 300,000 meetings, within a short turnaround just would be unreasonable. So we're recommending that this process occur based on the needs of individual students over a period of time in an effort to mitigate the potential loss of skills caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Not all students will be in need of COVID compensatory services. However, every student with disability should go through this process. Again, this guidance is available on the website in writing, and this visual is also available on the patent website. Of course, there have been concerns around the reopening of schools, the providing services in person in school buildings opposed to in a potential remote setting. And I'm just again going to remind the field that every student with disability eligible under IDEA is eligible for a free and appropriate public education, including services, accommodations, both represented in their IEP or if eligible under Section 504. Again, it may not be feasible, depending on the needs of the individual child or the adolescents, to adhere to the social distancing guidelines. There may be some students, based on their particular need or circumstance, that it is impossible to maintain those social distancing guidelines. Teams should determine in those particular areas the student's ability to meet the guidelines on a case-by-case basis, and it may require some creative solutions. If a student with this disability is unable to follow the distancing or the health and safety guidelines, schools should at times follow the applicable federal and state law, collaborate with students, parents, and guardians, the medical provider, the certified school nurse, and school administrators to develop an appropriate plan of care for the student and for the staff that are involved that work with them. Collaboration with the students' parents, guardians, medical providers, and nurses can help ensure that it's a very comprehensive, solid plan. Every student with a disability is entitled to receive their services. We just want to make sure that is delivered in a way that maintains the safety of all. Speaking of the health and safety of all public schools are required, K through 12 schools are required to develop a health and safety plan prior to returning to students, prior to returning the students to the school buildings and resuming in-person instruction. Private and parochial schools are strongly encouraged to create a similar plan tailored to their unique needs. Safety and health of all students and all employees is paramount. Within these plans, detailed safety strategies are to be determined by the school entity to provide local guidance regarding personal protective equipment and social distancing based on the joint guidance of the Department of Health, Pennsylvania Department of Education, and the CDC. If you have attended any of your school board meetings recently, you most likely saw your school making their presentations of the plan, watching your school board having these very difficult discussions regarding your school district and regarding the steps to safely reopen. As the school entities develop these plans, there are many factors that are considered, and some of which relate to students with disabilities. Again, each school entity is unique, and how they have chosen to deliver services and instruction to students with disabilities depends on the unique factors of their school entity. All of these questions are considerations of each entity. By reading your school's health and safety plan, you can find answers to many of these questions. Because every school entity is different, I am unable to speak to the specifics of each school entities, and I recommend you read your school plan or reach out to your school district if you have any additional questions. You should be able to find the answers to some of the questions on these slides. It is true that some students with disabilities will not be able to adhere to social distancing requirements due to the nature of their disability, and some students with disabilities may not be able to wear masks. Some students may require visible masks for facial expressions, word formation, lip reading. Districts all over the Commonwealth have been planning laboriously to prepare for the safe reopening of schools and considering these and many other factors. There have been federal funds allocated to LEAs to offset the costs, some of the costs of the additional PPE protective equipment. Safety strategies will be determined by the school entity, local guidance for the personal protective equipment and social distancing. If an in-person model is used, school entities must ensure social distancing by limiting distance between staff and students to 6 feet. If staff or students need to rotate between classrooms, school entities must ensure social distancing and hygiene practices as part of the rotation. If students are unable to comply with social distancing due to their disability, additional health and safety precautions should be taken to limit the potential spread of the virus, such as additional sanitation stations, limiting the staff interaction or the crosswalk between students, or wearing the protective equipment as recommended. There are a variety of opening strategies occurring across the Commonwealth. For example, school entities are deciding to deliver instruction all in person, all remote, or by using a hybrid model. Regardless of the model used, least restrictive environment must be maintained. For the purpose of least restrictive environment, attending a virtual regular education class is the same as attending an in-person regular education class, and the least restrictive environment calculation does not change. If a school entity operates in cohorts when they are in person, the school entity should plan accordingly as they develop those cohorts to ensure the least restrictive environment is as it is reflected, as it should be, as it is reflected in the student's IEP. If there is a needed adjustment to a least restrictive environment that needs to occur due to the remote instructional model, the decision should be made through the IEP process in collaboration with the family. As we know, there has been quite a few conversations publicly regarding the use of masks. The Secretary of Health issued an order requiring children 2 years and older to wear a face mask covering unless they have a medical or mental health condition or disability. It should be documented in accordance with Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, or IDEA, that precludes the wearing of a face covering in school. Accommodations for such students should be made in partnership with the student's healthcare provider, school nurse, and IEP or 504 team. The CDC guidance includes exceptions to wearing face coverings. Anyone who has trouble breathing, anyone who is unconscious or incapacitated, or otherwise unable to remove the cloth face covering without assistance. Adaptations and alternatives should be considered whenever possible to increase the feasibility of wearing a cloth face covering or to reduce the risk of COVID-19 spreading if it is not possible to wear one. People who are deaf and hard of hearing, or those who care for or interact with persons who are hearing impaired, may be unable to wear face coverings if the students rely on lip reading to communicate. In this situation, consider using clear facial coverings. If clear face coverings are not available, considering whether you can use written communication, closed captioning, or decreased background noise communication to make it possible when wearing a face covering that blocks your lips. People with intellectual and developmental disabilities or mental health conditions or other sensory sensitivities may have challenges wearing a cloth face covering as well. In those situations, teachers could work with students or work with families to possibly desensitize the student. CDC does not recommend the use of face shields for normal everyday activities or as a substitute for cloth face coverings because it is unknown whether the face shields alone provide sufficient protection to others. So in summary, this is indicating that if there is a reason related to a student's disability that cannot wear a face mask, or the students need others around them to use a clear mask or face shield, it is an accommodation that can be included in the specially designed instruction of the IEP. That covers the questions that I am able to field today. However, if I did not respond to your question or you have something individual about your own child and you would like additional support, this is an email account that if you put your concern into it, we will be able to review it and I can assign an advisor to reach out to you specifically. This is also a support for parents. These are advocacy groups that if you need some support navigating this complex process of special education, you can reach out to them and they also can be a support for you as well. In conclusion, we all share something in common right now. We are all in a situation that we have never been in before. We are part of developing or experiencing shifts in education at an exponential rate. And we all wish we were not in this predicament and back to how life was prior to the pandemic. The problems of that time seem insignificant to the concerns we have moving forward. There have been some very positive gains from this experience, things we will want to continue moving forward when we do return to our more typical educational delivery model. But there are also many continued barriers to overcome. Moving forward, I would like to recommend to all parties to emphasize communication. This is a very isolating time. And if we do not have regular communication, it allows for miscommunication. It is a very stressful time, and that can cause the breakdown of communication. But now more than ever, we have to be diligent to work hard to keep the lines of communication open. I recommend to all parties, education, and families to come to the table in a problem-solving mode, in a solution mentality. We all know the struggles. We all have been trying to mitigate them, but there are more barriers to overcome, and we need a strong problem-solving, solution-minded, collaborative approach to the IEP meeting so we can yield very positive support and create productive ideas to work through some of our barriers imposed by the COVID-19 virus. This is tragic. This is a health crisis. This is not a situation where LEAs are willfully putting up barriers to servicing students with disabilities. Health and safety is the priority. Ensuring the health and safety of our students and staff and families and communities. Each LEA and community are best equipped to work with the local school leaders to develop plans that follow the priorities of the health and safety and educate their youth with a particular attention to students that have the greatest difficulty learning from remote settings. No one approach will work for all. These need to continue to be individual decisions based on the uniqueness of each community, school, and student with disabilities. The Pennsylvania Department of Education is encouraging caregivers and parents to engage with their local school leaders regarding their thoughts and concerns regarding the 2020-2021 school year in the midst of this pandemic. Special educators work hard to reach out to your families and keep them informed. Make them sure they feel connected to the process and are aware. In this situation, where we are at the mercy of this virus, we can only all work collaboratively to battle the barriers forced against all of us that are necessary to maintain the priority of health and safety. We need to come up with ideas and strategies that go around the barriers. I hope today I was able to provide some information to the families in the field. We recognize we do not have all of the answers, and as the situation morphs and evolves, as the virus ebbs and flows, we continue to emphasize the need for collaboration between home and school. Before I close, I did want to take a moment to thank all of the parents that have been posting positive messages about our educators and teachers on social media. This is an extremely challenging time, and we need to highlight the positives and share the ideas so we all can benefit. Teachers are in a very difficult position right now, and the encouraging positive efforts really helps to keep everybody motivated. And thank you to the teachers for all of you are doing to help transition our students into the 2020-21 school year positively. I continue to be in awe of the creative ideas being posted on social media and that it's being shared with me. I continue to be in awe by seeing the creative ways you are trying to welcome your students to the school this year in a very comfortable transition at the same time when we are creating a very sterile environment. I recognize teachers, this is not an easy task. You certainly didn't anticipate this while you were training in college or within your lifetime. And we recognize you too are working from home and you have your families and your own children to support in school as you are supporting so many other students. And we recognize many of you also have children with disabilities and are trying to be the special education teacher for your students and to support your own child with disabilities at home. So thank you. Sincerely, thank you for your efforts this year, your current efforts right now, and the efforts you are going to put forth in this upcoming school year. This year is not shaping up to be an easy year, but let's all work together so we are working through this crisis and that we can reflect back when this is over to all of the new possibilities we have created and implemented in our field. Please do not hesitate to lean on the supports developed by the Pennsylvania Training and Technical Center. Your intermediate units are another place to reach out to check their websites for supports. Your local special education task force, the state special education task force, and the special education advisory panel are all supports for families during this time, as well as Peel and all of the other agencies listed on the previous slide. In closing, Please take care of yourself, be well, and thank you for allowing me to speak to you today.